when the earthquake happened, I was living in Miami, Florida, and hating it, but that's where I was. And I remember feeling paralyzed because I really just wanted to be there. Like at that moment, at that instant, I really wanted to be there, and couldn't go. The airports were closed. There were no flights going in. And 10 days later, I weaseled my way into a humanitarian flight that was going down to start a mobile clinic in Jacmel, which is where the film is shot, but which is also a place where I lived for 2 years with my family 13 years ago. And so I got on that plane. It was a plane filled with doctors and nurses. And I remember feeling very frustrated that I'm just a filmmaker. Like, what can I do with this disaster? I'm just a filmmaker. I should have gone to medical school. I remember saying that to myself. And then I get to Haiti and I start to see something that I was not seeing in the mainstream media. I was seeing people who are mitigating and negotiating this disaster with so much hope and so much humor and so much grace that I was not seeing in the mainstream media, because the mainstream media loves to sort of exploit Black bodies, you know. You always see, you know, death of the Black bodies that are like bloated and so on and so forth. I mean, we saw it with Katrina, but we never see white bodies exposed that way. For some reason, I don't know why, and so it's a lack of respect for us. I have no idea. And so these images haunted me, and I kept like seeing something else, and I was seeing something else in the mainstream media, and I was seeing something else. I was experiencing something else.
There was a time when Nelson Mandela and of course OR had you know, they had this amazing practice. In fact, Minister Sulu had this amazing practice in downtown Joburg, a law firm. He was a middle-aged, well, I wouldn't say middle-aged. He was in his early 40s. Had a new family, and he had a lot to really like live for, if you think of it in the sense of what we deem to be successful. He had a new house, and he could have just lived his life. But he decided that at this point in our political struggle, what the ANC was trying to achieve through, I suppose, what you could call, I wouldn't say quite passive resistance, but definitely a non-violent movement, just didn't seem to be working. It was just after Sharpeville. And Nelson Mandela took it upon himself to, if they were going to start the armed struggle and armed propaganda, as they called it at the time, that he would be the first general of the army, which was Mkhonto weSizwe. But he'd never been a soldier before, you know. He was a lawyer. And he took it upon himself to first garner some support financially and, of course, military support and that sort of thing from other African states who had just recently gotten their independence. And this story is about his trip to other African states. And, of course, he also went to London to see what help they could get. But what makes the story interesting is we know, some people know about all that. You know, you read about it briefly, I suppose, in Long Walk to Freedom. But what we uncovered that was really interesting is also, I suppose, the counter-espionage that was happening between the Western forces and the ANC. You know, a lot of people thought that it was just by luck that the South African government happened to catch Nelson Mandela after he had returned from his trip for really what was a small criminal charge of he left the country without a passport. But it seemed he was sold out by a CIA agent, and MI6 as well had been watching him, and their concern was if the ANC at the moment is involved with the Communist Party and the Russians get hold of South Africa should the ANC win their campaign, then it would spell disaster for the West. And as we know, next thing that happened, the other guys that were Lily's Leaf got caught with all the papers for the armed rebellion, as it were, and Madiba was brought back from where he was being held, and he was accused #1 in the Rivonia trial. So I was interested in telling that story, telling a story of a young Mandela, a vigorous Mandela, a virile Mandela, a strong Mandela, the guy before the 27 years behind bars?
The story evolved. It was a very, very modest film to begin with. It was really a film about our curiosity of the whereabouts and perhaps the significance of the buried gun, which was a gift from Haile Selassie. Having started the quest, one thing led to another. Firstly, Claire Evans and I decided the story probably began in Ethiopia. I mean, that's where Haile Selassie handed over and presented through his general, Tadessa, this gift. Was it symbolic? Was it practical? There were a lot of questions that needed asking. So we went to Ethiopia, and of course, it was a lot more complicated than we thought it was going to be, is the answer. We went on national radio. We had a press conference. We explained why we were there, the nature of the film, and we asked for anybody who had any personal experience or contact with Mandela while he was training in Ethiopia. A number of people were still alive, thankfully, who had a daily contact, bodyguards and instructors, and of course the bandmaster. All had very, very vivid recollections.
Mine is shot down, really Marikana, the Marikana massacre, sparked a conversation about who we are, what is our project, what was the project, have we gone astray? And it's a big conversation. And so I decided to bite off that conversation, attempt to create some form around that conversation. It's big in the sense it questions the nationalist project. It questions the commitment to equality, social, economic, political. The stories that have followed from Marikana onwards really speak to these issues very fundamentally. And the film's been designed and crafted in order to make a contribution to that conversation, make a contribution, I describe it as towards an analysis in some ways. It's an analytical film. It's very difficult to make political, analytical films which are also compelling, riveting, keep you on the edge of your seat, and don't bore you. And that's what I was attempting to do, not bore people.